Welcome, welcome. Let's get started. It's 6:31. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:31. Just 1 minute late, not too bad. And we'll call roll. John Mora present, Frank Beuthin present, Katja, Jahn present, Alex Gharagozlow present. Look at that. Erika, Petras present, Barauskas present, and Xavier, Reyes. Let's see. All right, he'll be here. Also present, Mora, Ryan, Nancy Ackman, Black, McDonald's folks, and Luis Veramontes. Is there a public comment? Great. And actually, would you do me a favor and bring me the sheet? So
absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Last chance, anyone?
Last chance? Okay.
Going.
Christiana, you've got the time on this, so 5 minutes for each person. Do you have a watch? You know what? That's okay. Katja, if you could do that, and then we'll just next time. And
yeah, next time I'll bring it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, Dominique Zoso.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
5 minutes. Right?
5 minutes. Yes, I'll keep it short. I'm on a time budget. 3.5 points. First half point is John Mora. I was sorry to hear about you stepping down. I don't know. I would like to express my gratitude for what you did. I think it's untimely in the sense that, you know, it started going well. So sorry about hearing that you're leaving. Thanks for what you did, and I think there will be more on that later. Second point is for something that is not on the agenda, so I know your answer beforehand. Would you be able to give us a status update, progress report on the Pathways program? What has happened in the meantime? Anything like that? Number 3 was for items that are on the agenda. So this is for the NGA report that we're going to hear tonight and the parent surveys that we're going to hear about today. I would like to ask you, and that actually in general, whether it would be possible to make these reports and board documents in general publicly available electronically, maybe rather than just on paper for parents to look at. I think that would be very, very helpful and very much appreciated by the community. And the last one is a technical aspect. I really want to make clear that this is nothing personal. It is with respect to point 5A on the agenda, I think. Yes, items for vote, for discussion and vote, the approval of Mrs. Stephanie Yeager as a trustee. So those who are on Facebook, you know what this is going to be about. I don't know the person, okay, so there is no judgment in what I'm going to ask you right now. I would like to ask whether, in the light of how the GICS middle school petition was turned down by LAUSD, partly because of the current composition of the board and what they expect GICS to develop the board, whether this person is an appropriate fit in that respect or not. And the second part of that question is even more difficult because I've been talking to Nancy, and I have, again, absolutely nothing against all these persons involved, but I want to make sure that the community knows about that. So there might be, and I'm asking that, a potential conflict of interest because people know each other and have been doing business. I don't know. I'm just bringing it up. I would want it to be up in the open. So these are my points and questions. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Sean.
Thank you very much. Tina, I think.
Not really a comment.
It's just to say thank you to Katja.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. All of the seeds that were able to grow because of your watering. Thank you.
In the color of your car.
In the color of my car, yes.
And to John, who was the wind beneath our wings.
Oh, thank you so much.
So that's from the GP.
If it gets too intense tonight, I'm just going to hold this.
Yeah.
You cannot be mad when you're looking at this. This is beautiful. Thank you very much. Nothing else?
No, that's it.
Okay. Great. Put that there. Andrea, Martin.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to read this because I know I'm on a call here. I'd like to just speak tonight from two perspectives. First, as a parent, Erika taught me this, actually. She's always like, I'm in the mom mode now, and I'm in the board person mode now. So I'm going to talk to you first as a mom, as a parent, and then as a parent who was chairperson of the Study Advisory Commission working together with the Netzel Grigsby team. This has been a very tough year. I think from the disappointments with the McConnell building, the denial of our middle school petition, to staff issues and community upset over a myriad of things, from facility limitations and fundraising to program development, and now our board president stepping down, we've suffered more losses than I think any of us had anticipated. I hope that we can garner that Goethe spirit that China always has in abundance and say that we've landed at a point of opportunity. We have two additional outstanding candidates for parent board rep, a decision about our strategy for creating a strategic plan, a month-long study by Netzel Grigsby helping to define our organization's strengths, weaknesses, and capacities, organizational restructuring proposals, which include a dean of students and a language coordinator, talk about a bridge program with Marina Del Rey Middle School, and the election of a new board president. You have many key decisions to make, which will chart our near and long-term course, and you have a lot of community members watching you and bringing very strong points of view. I think I want you to get, our parents want things to go beautifully. This is about our children and the opportunities we want to give to them. So we hope for good results from you. We want to become a community of trust and openness and solid communication. John Mora, I'm not happy to see you step down. I thank you also for your passion and your devotion to the school and your great efforts to lead us with intelligence and new blood on the board. I feel that I see the first fruits of your labors, and I'm grateful for your willingness to make changes. Katja, you've given so much time and energy and devotion to serving our school, and I'm extremely grateful for your passion. Speaking of changes ahead, much of what I personally hope to see as we move forward is reflected in the presentation you'll see tonight from Netzel Grigsby. What I would like to see, better communication. At the second coffee chat, John, Gwennis, and Katja met with over 20 parents, and many of their questions were patiently and thoughtfully answered. And I applaud you all for making this time available to meet with parents so that we may get deeper information. Please keep this up on a regular basis. Improved website. Improved website. Making the documents underlying the board meetings available on our website as a standard practice could be considered. Making them available in the main office, which closes at 4:30 on the Friday before a meeting, does not do much to engender a sense that the parent community is welcome to read and prepare and inform ourselves of the agenda items. A vibrant site council, composed of teachers, parents, and administration, whose annual report is eagerly anticipated by the board for insight into our academic standards and program development. And development of standing board committees, as already begun, to secure the discussions and research required to provide you with data on matters such as strategic financial planning, corporate sponsorships and grants, political action, and more. Self-reflection and assessment is not always easy, but I think it is necessary for healthy growth. We have parent and staff survey results being presented tonight, which Erika and Katja have worked very long and hard on compiling. I hope that they'll be able to speak for longer than 10 minutes if needed to convey the sense of importance. Recently, Gwennis commissioned a parent survey to find out more about our aftercare program and whether it was meeting our family's needs, and has used that input directly to lead conversations with potential providers for next year. And we have the NG study. Please listen tonight with open minds to what you are given. Finally, I would like to publicly thank Study Advisory Committee members Biggie Silscher, Anna Witzgal, Tina Franke, and Tom Taylor, Alex, John, Frank, and Gwennis for very honest and critical conversations and actions working on the Study Advisory Committee. When John asked me to lead the committee, I had a few reservations, but I spoke with John and Nancy Ackerman, and they helped allay my concerns. Nancy assured me of the integrity of the process and the importance of getting solid data from our interviewees. We created a list of outstanding representatives from our community within and without to be interviewed by the Netzel Grigsby team, and we have great confidence in the quality of the interviewees whom we provided. A number of stakeholders present this evening also gave their time to be interviewed, all with the intention, I hope, to be as honest as possible about where we are and where we can go in order to support our school. Thank you for your time. Please allow the Netzel Grigsby team to present their findings fully first and hold off on your questions until they've finished. This is important for them to give you a comprehensive overview of their findings and recommendations. Our committee members have confidence in the findings of the study, and we ask that you use this input to constructively move us into our next phase of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to approval of the agenda as presented. Does anyone want to take anything off the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I can motion.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. So we'll move on past the consent items to items for discussion and vote. And the first item is approval of Stephanie Yeager as trustee of the GICS Board of Trustees. And Stephanie Yeager just stepped in. Welcome. I want to say a couple of things, and then I'm going to put you on the spot, as you know. Stephanie was one of the parents who was around at the very beginning of founding the school, was a parent rep to the board, and only stepped down actually because, much like Katja, her child went to another school. So otherwise would have stayed on for, I think, another year or more. I reached out to Stephanie because the most important thing in a board member is an absolute commitment to the mission of the school. And Stephanie has already demonstrated that, and working with her was fantastic. But more than that, her background as in academia, also as a Lutheran delegate to the LAUSD Superintendent's Interfaith Roundtable, board chair of New City Parish in Inglewood, currently board member on several nonprofits all over Los Angeles, and also having led churches in various cities. Almost always with a social justice mission and certainly a devotion to social justice in her heart. I thought, well, this is fantastic. So I was very excited that Stephanie was available and wanted to come back and serve us. So if I could put you on the spot for a couple of minutes and tell us about yourself and what brings you back in your words.
Having returned from Chicago, where we worked for 2 years, back to Los Angeles, I have the opportunity to renew my commitment to this school that I believe in passionately. My children went here. I believe in the IB model and inquiry-based education. I have some understanding of it. I myself grew up bilingually, German-English, so I have and I taught German and come to the curriculum with a particular background in foreign language acquisition. I am a strong supporter of independent charter schools and watch this school grow out of the commitments of founding families. And I welcome the chance to get back and continue the process. I think one piece that I bring to it is that I was heavily involved in the middle school task force back when that's what it was called, before the middle school portion of the charter was presented. And so I think I bring some of that history and the process of decision making that was associated with that might be helpful to the board, particularly at this juncture as the school engages in strategic planning and trying to figure out how best to move forward in terms of expansion. So I think that's kind of the nugget that I bring at this particular juncture beyond sort of all the other kind of regular commitments. Plus, I really like the people. And it's just great to be back in the classroom that was my daughter's, I think it was my daughter's 4th grade classroom. and to see many parents here who are, you know, good friends too, even though our paths haven't crossed. And I even remember the ex-ed events. I should say I also bring a particular attentiveness to financial management of nonprofits and sustainability. So that's the kind of thing that I have a concern for as we go forward. Does that meet your needs? I'm happy to answer other questions.
Yeah, let's open it up for questions. Well, I'll say that I should have said at the beginning that to remind everyone sort of what our strategy is in a growing board, that, you know, bringing on a few folks, 1, 2, 3 folks who have really solid charter experience, get everything moving in terms of governance, parliamentary procedure, really getting a strong board, and then at that point, leveraging that competence to fill out all of those expertise areas that we know we need. So Stephanie clearly fits right into that strategy that we've articulated for the last several months. So.
And my only comment is I think her background is very suitable and exactly what we need. So I'm really excited. And I would venture the guess that Stephanie knows what she gets herself into. I think it's very important for the community to realize that there's so much work going into serving on this board, and that's not easy to come by, not in the business areas that we really want to expand our board. So I think Stephanie is the perfect combination of understanding what it means to serve on this board in the sense of you still need to roll up your sleeves quite a bit, and you still need to spend quite a bit of time until this dream fully comes to fruition. And that is very difficult to bring somebody on board from outside who has never touched this or who has been on other charter boards for like here that were more developed than us. So I think Stephanie is the perfect fit, and I thank you for going the path of nominating her, and I thank you for agreeing to it.
So I would endorse Stephanie for in the interim because we're, as the study will show, we're 2 years away from probably having a professional board. Ultimately, what this board needs, I think, it's people with deeper pockets. But we're not there yet professionally, from a professional setup. So all hands on deck are welcome, and I'm looking forward to Stephanie providing the governance aspect she always was very strong at, and so I would endorse it. And she has my vote.
Fundraising.
I know you know I know.
Empty pockets, but I don't mind asking for
no, but
I like
what I ultimately mean, I think we as a board are like we cannot attract anyone professionally to sit on a board and ask him to give us an enormous amount of money, and we need to develop as a board and as a school to be in that position. And so, as such, you know, you're going to be helping us. I think very much so. Thank you.
You raise a good point. We need to institute that give or get policy.
Yeah.
Right.
I like how you just stood up to Frank, and literally I had this moment where I was trying to formulate what I wanted to ask you, and after that exchange just occurred, I'm full endorsement as well.
I think it was an exchange with Frank that got me onto the board the first time. We were arguing over whether the middle school could be immersion or not.
Right.
And then I landed on the board to continue the conversation.
That is always very fruitful.
Alex.
You have my full endorsement. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no more comments, let's go ahead and vote. I'm going to go ahead and make this motion. And is there a second? Terrible second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, welcome back. maybe, actually here probably looks like the best spot.
If you sit there, you'll probably see better. Whatever. Which item is Erika? Erika. Nice to meet you.
You know what, this is probably a little better. Actually, Stephanie, over here.
I moved this so that some of you could sit, because what I was trying to.
Watch your stuff.
Share what? You can tell it.
Come and give Frank a hug so that there's no false perception of attendance. Yeah, oh yes, no, I sure do.
Okay, we're going to move on to item B, which is approval of April financials. Normally we go through financials in quite some detail. We've got a lot to do tonight, a lot of things, not the least of which is the fiscal year budget, so we're going to try to move through April rather quickly.
This evening, Ryan Griffin will be presenting the April financials, and I will be presenting the 15-16 annual budget.
Okay. And I'm Ryan Griffin from XED. Gwyneth has some additional handouts for anyone who would like a copy in front of them. But I'll be presenting the April financials, and I always start each meeting by going over enrollment. And our enrollment information as of April only went through month 8 attendance. So try to keep in mind this isn't exactly where we're at at the end of the school year, but this was back in April. And our enrollment at that point in time was 428 students, which was better than our original budget, which is the theme for us this year. We've been higher enrolled than originally planned for. And also our ADA percentage has been coming in higher throughout the year. So all good news to report in terms of attendance. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to the financial portion? No? Okay. The April financials are very similar to the financials that we've been presenting at the last few board meetings in the sense that there aren't any new variances to report. So just going through quickly, I will say that in terms of revenue, we have good news. We have increased amount of revenue, about $90,000 from our local control funding formula, and that's due to the enrollment because students are the lifeline of the school, and we are funded based on our average daily attendance. So good news there. In terms of our state revenue, we have an increase of about $26,000 in mandate block grant funds that we didn't have in the original budget, which is also a plus for this school year and is also consistent with what we've been reporting at the prior board meetings. The one piece that's worth pointing out is our fundraising number. So fundraising for the year was lowered by the board by about $50,000, not lowering our goal, but lowering our assumption in order to be more conservative and take a conservative stance at our budgeting. So that's why you see the $50,000 in the red for the grants and fundraising for the year. Any questions on revenue before I move on to expenditures? Expenditures, also same variances that we've been describing. We're seeing savings in the certificated and the classified salaries based on a different staffing plan than we originally budgeted for this year. And when I say a different staffing plan, I mean certain positions that we thought were going to be hired for on payroll actually not being filled by an employee per se, but instead an independent contractor to perform our art teaching responsibilities. And also our savings in the classified positions are due to the timing of hiring, because we had planned on most of our office staff starting right on July 1st, but that wasn't the case. So we did realize some savings in the earlier months of the school year. Going on to our largest variance for the year is in our operating expenditures, and that has to do with the realization of expenditures for our capital project that we had attempted and we did not proceed with. So the reason why we have the large variance there is because all of those expenditures had to be realized this school year when we pulled the plug on the project. That's the revenue and expenses for the year, and this boils down to a net income or a net loss for this year of $169,000. And I will say that you know, due to good budgeting and amazing efforts by the school, the community, and the board, we have had a large fund balance that was able to absorb a loss like this, which is a very fortunate situation, and proves that, you know, we have been fiscally responsible in prior years, and that's why we were able to shield ourselves from this large impact this year. Any questions on revenues and expenditures? Okay, moving on to the balance sheet, I always like to highlight cash. So we ended the month of April with $1.2 million, and we're forecasting to end the year with just under $1 million in cash in the bank. And we are accruing about a little under $300,000, which means that we earned that money in the 14-15 school year. However, the timing of the money doesn't come in until the early months of July and August. So we will be seeing most of that revenue coming in the early months, the early summer months. In terms of liabilities, we don't have any debts. Our deferred revenue of the Common Core monies was expended this year and realized in our revenue section, and there's nothing really else to point out on the balance sheet, unless anyone wants any clarification or other details.
So I just have a question. So if income is coming in July, then you would not show it as an accrual. You're just showing cash.
We're recognizing the revenue as of June 30th because it's revenue associated to this school year. However, the cash won't come in until July and August.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay. At the end of the packet, in the last page, you'll see the check register for the month of April, and that shows the cash disbursements that went out. And we always urge the board and the community to take a look at this because these are public funds, and if anyone has any questions, Gwennis and myself are here to answer those either now or at a later date, whenever you like.
I have one question. The $57 for the live scan.
Yes.
What's that about?
The Department of Defense clearance.
So, and this is
I'm not sure.
57 just sounds like a lot. I don't know. It's like, I don't want to be too nitpicky, but first of all, I thought everyone paid for their own live scans, and then it's kind of
that number. Just to answer your question on the total dollar figure. I see a lot of schools with similar expenditures, and that seems to me the going rate for a live scan. I haven't seen anything.
I thought we paid like $20 or $30.
No,
No.
47. We have a special for 47.
Oh,
Yeah.
maybe that's what. I remember there was a special, but yeah, okay. It's in it.
So Katja, don't want to ask her.
Yeah, I'm trying.
That
What
was
is?
yours.
I'm not even finding them right now.
For old time's
But
sake.
it was you.
Where's this excellence in education?
Who is that?
Why are they so expensive?
Yes, why are they?
They're in the bottom. Last third.
Okay, any questions on the check register? Okay.
Motion.
Is that it?
That's it for the April financials.
Okay. Frank, you make a motion to accept the April financials. Who'd like to second?
Second.
Erika will second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? And I forgot to ask the abstention. You'll probably abstain from this, I guess. Or you can vote for it or against it.
Go for it.
Okay, great. So that's unanimous on the approval of April financials. Approval of the budget for the fiscal 2015-2016 fiscal year. I just want to say we are right on schedule right now. So we allocated 30 minutes, so let's see if we can do it.
I'll be following this sheet here, so I'll make sure the board has that. We have a few extras. Do we have here?
Can you pass one down?
Anybody else need this one?
Oh, okay, then I gave her mine. Yeah.
I've got mine on the computer.
Okay, wait, we do need another.
Another?
A couple more.
And for the audience? Thank you, Liz.
One more.
One more. One more for the board. Thank you.
Air conditioning is like crazy in here.
Javier?
Why don't you think Yes. You like it? It's so freaking cold.
Okay, revenue is calculated on the basis always of enrollment, projected enrollment. And the projected enrollment for next school year is 438 students with an average attendance rate of 95%. Next school year will bring two classes of kindergarten with an average class size of 26, with two classes of 5th grade leaving. So it's pretty much the same enrollment as we have this year. I'm going to begin with the 8,000 lines and talk about the local control funding formula, and that is shown as 8011. We see a 20% increase from 1415 to 1516, so that's very nice to see. In 8100, other federal income, special education remains pretty much the same, slight increase of 6%, but it is an increase. 8300, other state income, shows a 1% increase from the state in special education funding. 8550, our mandate block grant, is increased dramatically from $31,040 to $244,268.
That's just a state program?
Mandate.
The local.
I'll jump in real quick, Gwennis.
Sure.
So for the 15-16 school year, we had two really great pieces of news from the governor's May revised budget. And one of them, which is shown in the local control funding formula, is that the gap closing increment that is getting us to full funding for our revenue to schools is being closed by a much larger percentage than we anticipated. So this is a 53% gap closing increment, which means that we're getting so much closer to full funding, and it's just really great news. The other thing, go ahead, Katja.
Yeah. So the gap was approximately 30%, and we're closing half of that gap. Really? Okay.
Wow.
The other piece of really great news that Gwennis just kind of laid on you guys is that mandate block grant, right? So what that really is, it's just one-time funding that was designated to schools, and in the governor's May revise, he said that schools were going to get $575 per prior year ADA. And that's what that huge amount of an increase is. Now, there has been some talk that that number may even go up a little bit higher. But right now, this $575 per ADA is what we have in our budget. And the really great news about this funding is that it's not restricted to any one type of program. So it's one-time money for the school this year to be used for operations anyway.
And it won't go down. You said that there's a potential.
It will not go down.
Okay. And it's a one-time payment?
One-time payment.
And it is sustainable over the years?
You know,
No, it's one time this year.
It's one time this year. What the governor has in his budget next year is always kind of
It's a
an
gift
unknown.
and we take it with the roll around it.
Well, no, I'm just saying, you know, you just need to look at sustainability that you have.
What this is, in a few words, also is a little bit of a catch-up from prior years being underfunded, and that's why it's a one-time funded line item, because the budget cannot sustain it every year. But it's a little bit of a catch-up for prior years, so it's also an opportunity for schools to also catch up on either program expenses or equipment or anything that was not afforded in prior years.
Go Jerry Brown,
Go.
is what we're saying.
Yeah, and another thing, just to contrast against the one-time Common Core funding that we received, and we had to spend it by a certain date, or it had to be returned. That's not the case here.
It can just flow into the budget.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful, nice.
And as we can see in the forecast for 16-17, you've dialed it back to conservative without the block grant.
Yeah, not everyone has that
Oh,
those
they have
years,
that,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Just the
okay.
15.
Yeah, we're focusing on the current year budget, the next year budget.
But it's a good point, yes.
Yeah,
We
it is
Which
one time.
answers this question.
Right, right, 5 years.
Okay, Gwen.
Okay, I'm going to continue to highlight certain areas. 6890, I'll start with 8599, and that's other state revenues. You can see then this year, as Ryan mentioned, we had $63,102 for Common Core funding, which was a one-time spending, had to be spent this year. We purchased the Chromebooks for the students, and that's why it's not carried forward. 8698 grants. Again, this is the German Consulate General grant that we receive every year. It's always comes in higher than the 10K, but we are very conservative when we put budgets. And under fundraising, 8699. Fundraising income is forecasted in the same amount as the past year. It has a conservative assumption that there will be an increase of students, as we had seen a pretty dramatic increase this year in free and reduced lunches.
And I really think that overall we need to, and this will be discussed later with the Netzel Grigsby study, but we need to do a better job of fundraising and reaching out to corporate sponsorships, and I'm hopeful that in our strategic planning we can come up with some committees that can maybe get more grant writing and the opportunities like that for us, but it's fine that it's not in the budget.
Okay, and under expenses, we begin with certificated salaries, and those are teachers because they are certificated. We begin with 1110 teacher salaries. If you notice, they are higher this year than last year, and that's due to a pay raise for our teachers. Our teachers received a 6% retro pay raise for this year, and moving forward to the 15-16 school year, they will receive a 4% pay raise. We have also increased the number of FTEs.
What is the number?
We are going to have 20 FTEs for next year, and that being adding a full-time Spanish teacher, a full-time art teacher, and a full-time PE teacher. 1900 is our certificated salaries, and the certificated salaries for 1900 on the next page. Now include an additional certificated administrator. This position is new. It has not been hired yet. This person will take over the duties, currently some of the duties of Mr. Brown, who, as you know, is leaving at the end of this school year. And this person will take on other administrative duties as well. This will free up Mrs. Brown and free her plate, and so that she can concentrate solely on IB and provide assistance to our teachers and our students, and she'll be able to devote 100% of her time as an IB administrator. Teacher salaries, stipend, extra duty. We've removed the stipend this year due to hiring a full-time Spanish teacher for next year. The Spanish teacher, part of her duties will be the SALT, which is the annual testing for English learners. So she will be coordinating. That was a stipend position this year. And the full-time Spanish teacher will take that on as additional duties. Under instructional aid salaries, $2,100, I'd like to point out that there is an increase in the funding, in the budget and amount for instructional aides, because this year we will be having 6 full-time instructional aides. So there will be an increase of their hours, which will entitle them, and you'll see that later on, as an increase in benefits as well. So we are also adding an additional instructional assistant, so that's why there's an increase there. Classified administrator salaries include 2 full-time IB coordinator positions, and that will be the, 2 full-time coordinator positions. One will be the IB coordinator, and we are also adding for next year a full-time language coordinator.
Why are they underclassified and not certificated?
That's where we always put them. We usually leave the teachers and administrators there.
You don't need a certificate.
You don't need it.
Yeah. Well, for one would assume for an IB coordinator you do, but
Not a state certificate.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. Other classified salaries, and that's our supervision program, our playground recess lunch personnel. Next year we will have 3 PRLs, with 1 of the 3 will be full-time, and that is also reflected in that in the 2,900. Under 3,400 categories, employee benefits, we can see that the STRS has increased and the PERS have increased, and again that's because of adding and STRS. That is the benefits for our certificated staff. We are making some of our staff full-time, so they have increase in benefits, and we're adding new staff as well. Under the PERS, that is for our classified staff, we are making 6 of them full-time, so that would increase the STRS benefits. Jumping down to 4,400, non-capitalized equipment. We've
Can I
added,
just make one comment?
absolutely.
So when you look at the overall payroll, we are spending 2/3 on payroll.
Always significant.
It's a significant amount, and that's where it should be. It should be between 50 and 2/3.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, that we do have, with the additional staff, that we do actually have a full program. The first time this year.
First time.
So that we can just further improve on our educational program. So I think it's a very good investment.
Yeah,
So-
That's the goal.
absolutely.
Gwennis, would you mind going back to 1,300? You mentioned the duties, but can you kind of...
Which one?
1,300, you mentioned Stephen Brown's replacement.
Or 1,900 certificated?
13.
13.
Certificated supervisor and administrative salary.
Oh, yes, it is
Just
13.
if you could fill that out a little bit more. I don't know if everyone followed.
Okay. As you're aware, Mr. Brown right now oversees student welfare and safety for our school. So that's taking care of all the safety as well as discipline issues. He'll be leaving us. The new administrator will assume those duties as well as other administrative duties. Right now, Mrs. Brown is juggling IB plus administrative duties that really are taking her time away from focusing on IB. And so the purpose of this additional administrator is to pick up the duties of Mr. Brown, as well as add on other duties as far as supervising staff, doing staff evaluations, and really acting in that regard, so she can focus on IB curriculum, mentoring, as we originally hired her to do, but her plate really just started to grow and get more full as the years went on, as the 2 years went on. So this will actually give her the opportunity to focus on IB.
And have you settled on a title?
Not
Is
yet.
Job? Okay.
Not yet.
And so that isn't posted yet?
It will be soon, as
Okay.
soon as the board approves the budget. We will get it out there.
Just one more comment on that notion is just that I think it is a strong balancing act between, the IB, the Common Core, and the German immersion program. So, that is, I feel, is the unbalanced portion of it yet, especially with the raising of the bar in the Common Core. And what does it mean to our educational program? So I think we need all hands on deck on this one in order to look forward and to further improve this program.
Agree. I agree. And one of Mrs. Brown's focuses next year will be in integrating the Common Core very specifically into the IB units of inquiry.
So
and that is a huge task on her plate.
We're going to have 2 full-time coordinators. We're going to have a German coordinator, an IB coordinator, and Mrs. Brown and...
No.
She's IB. She's the IB.
Then we'll have German language coordinator, and then the player to be named later.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, so based on these different roles, what are the functions that maybe a principal would do that is not yet covered, or vice versa, if you care just to comment on?
I'm not following you, not yet covered.
Based on the, I'm not quite sure what are the classical responsibilities of a principal.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that based on the extra administrative bandwidth that you're creating, that you are covering the some of those elements of a principal, or to what extent?
Absolutely. When we look at special education, that's a huge portion of the principal's responsibility. Right now it's shared between Mrs. Brown and myself. That would be, she would no longer be doing the special ed, nor me. So that gives me the opportunity to focus on the other things that I should be doing. So it will define roles very clearly, and really, I think with the definition of the rules, I think things will run a lot smoother. So special ed is one example. Another thing that principals work a lot on is the evaluation of teachers, meeting with the teachers, evaluating teachers, setting the goals. Another is the discipline.
Just on that one, to what extent will how will this reduce the teacher turnover?
Oh, it's hard to.
That's hard to
There's
predict.
so many. It is. There's so many factors that really impact teacher turnover. Everything from I'm homesick to I have a visa issue to this is just not working out for me here. But there are many factors. It would be hard to predict.
Thank you.
All right, keep moving.
Okay. Non-capitalized equipment. Fun topic.
Can I just one last comment?
Yeah.
Okay, this is also this is just an inside look, right? We're just looking at ourselves here, right? We have a structure. We're trying to improve it, right? From a staffing position, but we haven't really done any benchmarking, right? So we haven't really looked outside of the box and say, what does a real elementary school with 450 students really need? How is it staffed in the public sector? How is it staffed in the private sector? We're just looking at our program and looking at the way things
I don't know if that's totally true. I mean, we did a lot of research in the charter and came out with actually something very close to what this is, and we've been around for 6 years and we're adjusting to what we need. Your point's well taken generally, but I think we're doing a pretty good job in this.
Yeah, I just wanted to see some stuff like in a regular elementary school in the office, they have usually these kind of people. So we haven't really done that kind of stuff, or like from the back office support to look at the stuff. What is the benchmark? And I think from the teacher perspective, teacher and the educational perspective, I think it's going in really clearly in the right direction. But let's see whether the administrative side is also capable of handling it and then scaling it if need be. No?
This will certainly help.
Well, thank you.
Yes, it will. Okay, back to 4400, non-capitalized equipment. As you know, our computers are very antiquated for our staff. We have LAUSD computers that have been repaired over and over, and at the point where they're completely fried, and we're having a difficult time getting them replaced. So we've set aside some money to replace our teachers' computers that can no longer be fixed as needed. Under food and food supplies, it is a generous amount that we've put in there because we're at this point, 60,000 is pretty generous, but we're at this point not sure what the cost of the lunches will be for next year. This can certainly be adjusted if it's too high.
I have a question on the computers. Can we not replace them?
We try.
Have them replaced by the district?
We're trying. We are trying
Is
very
that
hard.
part of our...
Absolutely part of Prop 39. You get a
Yeah.
room completely stocked and ready to go. You don't even need to buy pencils.
Which
in theory.
includes for every room equals one teacher, a computer for the teacher.
I don't know, but
Okay.
But it could be
But
a really old,
probably.
barely working computer.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
You get nothing.
That's right.
And we may be able to fundraise for some of these things, but I think it's always good to make your budget as conservative as possible.
Yeah.
5620, our equipment lease, that also includes our storage container that we have here on campus. LAUSD has promised to put one here for our earthquake kits. They've promised, and I hope at no cost, but we have some money here in case we do have to pay for it. Currently, we are leasing at U.S. Storage on the corner of Braddock and Culver because we were not able to bring in a container this year, so we'll see what happens over the summer.
Incidentally, the cost that they charge for that storage unit should be 65 cents per square foot.
Okay.
Not a penny more. Well, somewhere around 65. Same as the pro
Same
rata share.
calculation of the pro rata.
Yeah, just check their invoice.
Okay. 5850 are non-instructional consultants. Those are folks that do HR, tech support, our CalPad support, which next year we will be doing remotely, as well as our data support. 5851 instructional consultants. Those are folks that come in and do professional development and trainings, such as a consultant that comes in and works with our staff for caring school communities, for example. Our benchmark trainings with Galileo, triadic agreement trainings. We are planning next year for Envision math trainings because when we look through and we see that I'm happy to say that all grade levels will have the Common Core, will have Envision Math next year. And so that is going to require significant training for our teachers. And so that is covered in the 5851 line item. 5897 are fundraising costs, again keeping in line with last year's costs. And
can I talk about the XED line?
Yeah, what's up with the XED line? It's going down.
It's going down.
It's going down.
Please tell us about it.
Why is it going down?
Because we negotiated.
Because they're nice.
Negotiated and we're nice and.
Thank you to all involved.
Excellent education.
We negotiated. Remember we had an RFP on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this was. Okay.
Okay. And Ryan, anything that I have not highlighted that you want to bring up? Because those were my talking points.
Well, I actually did want to add just to the 5851, which it's the largest amount
Instructional
consultants. This is also for classroom instruction when you bring in either special ed instruction, substitute teachers,
yes,
or any of
thank
that.
you, the substitute
so
teachers.
a lot of that goes directly into the classroom, not necessarily people.
Yeah. I think this is a very instruction-friendly budget and classroom-friendly budget.
The fundraising costs. So what's in the 2014-15, is that what was budgeted last year or what was real expense?
That was what was budgeted.
Okay, and
No, this
no,
is
real expense?
93,462.
Yes, real expense, correct.
For last year.
Last year. So that includes Netzel Grigsby's capital campaign study, no?
No, that's not there. This is the guys who came in at the very last minute and did
For
the gala. So,
but we're not planning to use them again, I would hope.
No, so this could be over budgeted.
Conservatively
Yeah.
budgeted.
I have a question on the books and materials. I think one of the comments in the parent surveys was that the classrooms don't have enough materials. I mean, would it hurt if we added more to that line item since we do have the money? Or
Are you looking at 4110, approved textbooks?
No, 4210.
42 is our reference materials. The textbooks are our hardback books. Obviously, the reference materials are the replacement materials. That's usually not a lot of money spent in that. It's like if you're replacing a workbook or...
Oh, I see.
It's not the core book.
Are
itself.
you referring to what is budgeted in 4310 student materials? Is that what you...
Yeah, maybe that's what it is, just in general classrooms. And I see that one's pretty healthy and that's an increase, so maybe that's good then.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
We sat down, Betty and I sat down before this was put together and planned what we needed.
Okay, great.
Do you have a question?
I just want to validate my assumption. At the last board meeting, it was stated that we needed a budget for the purposes of sending it to the LAUSD, and then there would then be a revision. But it sounds as though a lot of work has gone into actually coming up with the actual budget, and there will be no requirement for a mid-period review or adjustment.
I would just, sorry, Glennis, to cut you off. You know, when you start a school year, there's always, you know, this is what we're planning on as of now, but there's always unknowns on day one of school. You know, are all of the students going to come? Are all of them going to stay? You know, it typically takes about a month into the school year till you can really kind of gauge that. And also, you know, as of right now, you know, the April presentation that I just spoke to had big variances due to timing of hiring and also different staffing plans. You know, hiring someone versus going with an independent contractor. So depending on the timing of the posting of positions that Gwennis has available, depending on actual enrollment during the first month of school, I think that it is still a good practice to reassess after the school year begins. There shouldn't be too much deviation from this original plan, but I do think that you know, probably in September or October, the board should, you know, just kind of gauge to see, you know, are we on track? Do we need to rethink anything?
Okay. Are there any positions, Glennis, that you would like to have added to the staffing of the school, particularly on the administration side, the business side of the school, that you were contemplating to request, but you decided not to request because you felt that maybe the budget couldn't be supported?
No, I'm comfortable with what's presented.
My only question, I guess, would be is if we would consider hiring a part-time grant writer, like a 0.25 or 0.5 FTE. I really think we need that. So whether that's a discussion for this year's budget or next year's, you know, I think it's important.
I think you can get that for free from our very intelligent parent body.
Well, we can try, but parent body's doing a lot, you know, they volunteer a lot, so. We tried to get it off the ground this year and it didn't really happen, so.
Glynis, I have a couple of questions. One concerns the budget for the fundraising in relationship to the anticipated income. Does the income number take into account the expense, or am I reading this right? There's a ratio of about $100,000 in expense for $250,000 income.
For 350 top line.
350 is our.
That's after expenses?
No, before expenses.
Before.
That's what I'm saying, though, the ratio is a cost of $100,000 to secure $250,000.
It's
350.
It's no to secure
a balance of
secure the budget.
Well, it would be a balance of.
Oh, a balance of 250. That seems
Not a good ratio. Yeah.
Not an ideal ratio from my perspective. I just
This fundraising actually doubled almost. This fundraising expense from last year was 58 and now it's 99.
Correct.
How come?
Because of the guys who came in at the
That was 14,000.
Yeah, but there were other expenses probably associated with it.
And we don't know if we're doing that this next year.
I'm just raising it, that it would seem to me that if we have an expense of $100,000 towards fundraising in a budget, that we would want to anticipate that $100,000 would buy more than $250,000.
Exactly.
So I just.
Well, I think it did
this
this year.
It did this year.
This was just in the budget for 350. What is the actual number on the top line this year, Ryan? You know?
I passed it out last
I don't
week,
have
but
the
I don't-
actual.
It's 447, is
It's
that
like
right?
Yeah, that's
pretty high.
the forecasted. So,
That's
and
actual
again,
year-to-date.
you know,
But that was April.
and
It's
again, I
actually
mean,
higher.
that is all kinds of events in the school that contemplates the Goethe-Café and all these
Right,
other
right.
kind of things which came in. But bear in mind that the assumption in the fundraising, as we're trying to dial it down a little bit, are very conservative on both sides.
I just wanted to, and I had another couple other questions. One is I haven't read the reports yet about the capacity for capital campaigns and fundraising. But I don't see the strategic planning costs in the budget. Or perhaps I just can't find them.
Non-instructional consultants,
Where's the strategic planning?
It needs to be in there if it's not. So.
It would be
5850.
under the 50 non-instructional
5850.
consultants.
So was that accounted for?
Is it in, I'm just
Yes.
wondering, because if we're supposed to
Yes.
vote on that too.
Yes, I
just
only
wanna
gave
make
a couple examples of what one would be.
I just
Yeah,
wanted
that's
to double
pretty-
check.
Yeah, it's pretty hefty.
So it was this year 98,855 and 97,505.
91,855, yes.
Yeah, and in the 91,855, we had the study of NGA in there, yes or no?
Yes.
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 Yeah, we'll
So it's a
so
wash.
that number, I would guess, will come down. I can't
Yeah.
imagine we're gonna spend 97,000 to raise,
Yeah.
to your point, but maybe we can keep that sort of on the back,
Okay.
on the front burner for next time,
And-
or in August.
And then just my other question, I know you have said a few things, but I'm a little unclear still on the certificated administrator position that will be hired, what that will look like. And my understanding is that the board will not see a job description about that. So I just I'm wondering if you could just clarify for me what that pretty significant full-time administrator position would be.
That person will be in charge of again, replacing Mr. Brown's responsibilities, will be in charge of student welfare, student safety, attendance, keeping track of absences, attendances, also be in charge of supervising staff, as well as evaluating the staff. Special ed component, pretty much if you think about a principal's duties, and I'm not sure what the name would be yet, that varies, in line with that.
Would that cover the cross guard, like a cross guard for the?
Well, we have assistants to do that, but that person would be overseeing that, because that's part of student safety.
And so that's a pretty significant role
Yes, it is.
to
And needed, because right now, I'm juggling some of those responsibilities as well as Betty, on top of the other things that we have.
and just so I'm clear.
And we're losing a person.
The board will not see the job description, but will approve the hire, is that correct?
We'll approve the budget.
We approve all contracts, but technically, no, that's in Gwen's hands.
I just asked because if we're talking about somebody in the order of a principal, that's a pretty significant.
Well, by governance, we approve her contract.
Right.
And then she's in charge as the CEO of the corporation to run the school. And yes, the budget is a thing, but I don't see why we should getting involved in hiring a principal. I mean, that's my.
See how we've matured
Yes,
our
I
governance
tell
role?
you, you really have. It's a whole different fish. I just am trying to get clarity and wrap my head around. And are parents still involved in our personnel committee? Would they be working with you in that process? Or are we just way beyond that?
There's definitely a possibility.
Okay, just
So
curious.
there's no magic to these numbers. There's linear extrapolation, right? The school numbers, some of the outcome. This is not like, how do we arrive at 97? Just take it by the number of 1 point. Like the student enrollment goes up, projected by 3%. So goes all the the mandatory expenses go up by 3%. So this is just because it assumes that we did what we did last year semi-efficiently, and we continue to do this semi-efficiently, or even improve on it. So that's how these conservative budget numbers were developed. So there's no magic to it. Sometimes these are really crooked numbers, and they look as there's a lot of thought process that's going on, but it's not.
I'm fine with having 97,000 set aside for all kinds of consultancy work that we may have to endeavor next year.
Right.
Sorry, because Katja's talking about consultants, I just wanted to jump in because, one of the large expenditures around that had to do with, it was kind of HR related work around, visas and other sorts of expenses that are unique to this school because of the sort of program that you're offering the students. So So that's one expense that's in that big number.
Visa expenses are non-instructional consultants?
Not visa expenses, but the vendor escapes my name. I mean, the name escapes me, but
Our HR consultant.
Should that not be in a different category?
No, because it's non-instructional.
So in the interest of time, let's answer every question that everyone has, but what are those questions? So Ed, did we get down to the bottom, ending cash balance of 1.1? Yeah.
I don't have a question, I have a comment, and I want to underscore the point raised earlier. We're pacing to spend approximately around $600 more per student. When I look at the staffing ratio, which is more than, so it's very generous in terms of the teaching and the academic experience, which is excellent. But I do underscore that there are certain things we need to do to pivot towards fundraising that should be staffed. And I encourage you to add those and go over budget this year.
Well, here's an interesting point. If we figure out during the year that we need additional positions, maybe strategic positions, we have, at least under these assumptions, the room to make these decisions and to make these hires. Contingent upon raising doing the fundraising, the inner fundraising, I call it. So there is enough buffer in the budget so that we can make at least strategic moves mid-year once the strategic analysis is completed.
I agree with that.
And
I just see it that we see that as a luxury item, as a necessity. It's a necessity, and it shouldn't be viewed as a luxury.
But on the other hand, if I can argue on behalf of her, we haven't completed the strategic review, so she is working with what she's had. So she's putting a very conservative argument forward, and I hear your comment, and I think it's valid.
5% reserve goal is at the bottom. Is that, those numbers look very similar to each other. Our budgets were that close?
Yeah, so the 5%. The 5% is based off of the total expenses, and if we look at total expenses for the year that it's ending, it's $3,780,000, and the projected expenses for next year are $3,782,000. So
great. Okay. Good. Great. Any more questions? Comments? Okay. No? Okay. Frank, you want to make this motion?
I motion, yes.
Great. Who wants to second?
I'll second.
Erika will second. All those in favor of approving the budget for fiscal year 2015-2016? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great.
Thank you.
That was the fastest fiscal year review and approval ever. Sometimes it's taken 3 months. So.
And I gotta say, it was very detailed as well.
Yeah.
It was very detailed, but it was very organized.
I would like to thank Gwennis, I would like to thank Frank, and also Ryan and Luis. The process this year was really systematized. The questionnaire was fantastic. Yeah. The two meetings we had really covered a lot of ground. I know I went to just one, Frank went to one, Gwennis went to all of them, so thank you so much. All right, great. Okay, so we'll move on to the Netzel Grigsby Study Advisory Committee, and so the chair of the committee was Andrea. Andrea, did you want to say a few words before we got started, or? Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Take your time.
I really want to say, actually, I mostly wanted to say sort of what I said in my opening comments, which is that the process, just so everybody's clear, is that we've formed the study advisory committee made up of board members as well as other stakeholders. We met with Netzel Grigsby, got very clear on what the process was. The majority of their work is born out of interviews, extensive interviews that they do, which are entirely confidential, with stakeholders within the organization, as well as people outside of the organization who have the capacity and the ability to affect a positive capital campaign. to really assess also not just the capital campaign, but also sort of where we are organizationally. And so I think much of what you'll see is a reflection of specific organizational strengths and weaknesses, and there are recommendations that will then come directly out of this. So the work the advisory committee did primarily was to understand the process, to give our personal input into where we thought we needed to focus, and we were very committed to gathering a well-rounded group of people. I think we feel strongly that we got some fantastic individuals who were willing to be interviewed. So then we pass that off to the Netzel Grigsby team. So that's the presentation, and again, if the board could just let them get through it as best as possible, and then we've allotted plenty of time for questions, which they'll be, I'm sure, have to answer. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Why don't we get one row of lights turned off if we could?
Can we move it
just
up a
these
little
lights.
bit?
Give it a shot. Okay, not that one, the other one. Perfect. Thank you.
If Nancy steps away, you just maybe Nancy scoot back.
Sorry. Oh, that's perfect. Perfect.
Okay, well, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tissa Blackmore, and I'm Executive Vice President, Regional Director for Netzel Grigsby Associates. And my team, Nancy Ackerman, John Spokes, will actually do the majority of the speaking, but I wanted to introduce our team and our process. We work with nonprofit organizations all across the West Coast in a variety of situations where the organization has a need to move from where they're at to a step over whatever hurdle they're at to reach their goal. And often that is an assessment about how to go about fundraising to make that happen. Because with nonprofits, that's a key is being able to have the funds to reach your goals. So in this case, we really enjoyed our process working with you. Andrea talked about the process a bit. We'll get into a little bit more detail on that. But we thank you for involving us in this. Thank you for the opportunity to get to know you as a community of parents and teachers and board members. And we have a high respect for you as a school, as a community, and really for the passion and commitment of the stakeholders for the school. There's a huge amount of passion here. So let me talk to you a little bit about the overview, about what we were set out to accomplish. And I think one of the things that we found has been a bit, eye-opening, I think, for a number of people that were involved in it, is an understanding of how a charter school is so very unique. It's such an interesting blend of a public school and an independent school, for a public entity and a private nonprofit entity. It's just an amazing and interesting blend and very difficult to navigate. I think you all experience that on a regular basis. You have all the legal requirements of a public entity, but you have a need to be very strategic about how you involve people in your process and about how you govern yourself in a way that will engender charitable support. So again, it's just a very difficult path to walk. From our perspective, we come at this from that part of what you do, that where you need to involve people and govern yourself in a way that engenders charitable support. So that's the lens that we're looking at. So when we talk about our what we wanted to do in terms of organizational capacity and evaluating that, and fundraising capacity, it's from that lens of what you need to do to be able to involve people strategically and secure charitable support down the road. And I heard a lot of discussion about that with your budget. So our goal was to look at those things and then recommend a plan of action for you and a timeline to advance you in that aspect of what you do. Okay? And what we did then is we were evaluating your organizational capacity under that lens in terms of your image, how people perceive your mission effectiveness, your organizational strengths and weaknesses in that regard in terms of things that will secure you charitable support down the road, and your volunteer, parent body, board member, etc., and staff capacity to move you forward in that arena. We also took a very specific look at the possibility that you might want to move into campaign for a permanent site project. And so we were evaluating the strength of a campaign case to do that, in addition to your general organizational capacity to engender charitable support. So we tested, without a specific site in mind, the idea that you might need $3 million. If you were to acquire a site that then you would maybe need to remodel, not necessarily buy the site, but pick it up, lease it, remodel it, move in. It might be in those ranges. Those were some of the things you were looking at. That it would be a facility testing, a facility capable of housing a program that went all the way from TK through 12. We were testing people's interest in that and people's support for something like that, and again, and something that was located on the west side. So the materials that we put in front of people that we were testing had elements of all those things. And as Andrea said, it was the study committee that provided a lot of input into that, as well as elements we picked up from your strategic plan that you have in place right now, your website, your goals, other things that you have in writing about yourself. We evaluated who might be your potential major donors and how they viewed a case like that, who might be potential campaign leaders, and other external factors like competing efforts and other things that you need to look at. So as Andrea said, we reviewed internal data, your fundraising history, and other, where the funds are coming from, how you're raising your money, what kind of support you have, as well as external data from the interviewees. We developed a project budget and the case statement in conjunction with the study committee. We led a board retreat that, and we conducted a development audit, again, about your last 3 years of fundraising results, recruited the study committee. We conducted interviews. Our goal was to conduct 30 to 35 interviews. We actually ended up talking to, we had 41 interviews, talked to 44 different people. And there's always the question of how many were sort of internal, how many were external. 53% of those people were who would be considered inner family, board members, study committee members, parents, and then the balance were people who were more external stakeholders, public officials, people in the German community, people who were aware of you that were more external stakeholders. Okay. So I'm going to turn over Nancy for the findings. And I'm going to click forward. So am I in anybody's way standing over here?
So as Tissa mentioned, we were asking questions that had to do with the image of Goethe. And you can see here there was a positive image among parents, but a rather low profile in the broader community. Now some of that has to do with the fact that you're a young school, you're 6 years old. In terms of, you can see there the 73% point. The executive director, IB coordinator, and teachers were really praised by almost everyone we interviewed, and the school was rated very high in its effectiveness and value compared to other charter schools. But the low visibility is, in our opinion, costing Goethe leadership and significant financial connections. Here are some representative comments we received about the image.
Was that too fast?
Yes.
Okay.
And here were some areas of improvement that were suggested by the interviewees. We've kind of labeled these, if you look at the first bullet point, that the IB and the German program need strengthening, and then again this sub-bullet, IB emphasis or German immersion emphasis. There were a number of areas of real tension that existed in the interviewees, and this was one area. Some people felt it was an IB school. Some people felt it's a German immersion school. So that was one particular area of tension. Another was strengthening the existing TK through 5 or expanding into other charters. So we're going to identify some areas of tension as we go along through this. One thing that was mentioned here in terms of the IB and and the German immersion program was an inconsistency between classrooms and teachers.
Did you want to mention the LAUSD?
Oh, and the weak partnership with LAUSD, again, another sort of tension that emerged because, in our opinion, that's a relationship that needs to be strengthened. And we heard from both the individuals at LAUSD and individuals here at the school about a weakness there. Interviewees mentioned that Goethe has a real struggle to identify itself. And so our finding is that really that identity has not been transmitted to the stakeholders. It usually starts at the top, works its way down. Here's some representative comments about those areas of improvement. Can you see Alex? Okay. Here's a little graph that shows our findings, and really, if you would concentrate here, this lavender is excellent, this is good, and you can see that measuring the image is the top bar, mission effectiveness is the second bar down, program quality, and comparative quality. So really some very, very significantly high ratings in those areas from among the interviewees. Okay.
I'm having not enough time yet.
Can you read it from where you are? Do you want me to? For those of you in the back, this is the 50% mark. So you can see in terms of excellent and good, you were 50% or above in every category. Okay, we of course asked a number of questions that had to do with the board. There was a significantly low confidence in the board's effectiveness, lack of understanding about effective partnerships between various arms of the organization, and some role confusion. And by that I mean which part of the organization has the responsibility for what, and how do all of those branches, if you will, work together to really further the mission, work together to further the mission. Okay. Here's some more representative comments on the topic of the board. Yes? You're shaking your head no, but that doesn't, you had enough time? Okay.
Yes is, do you have enough, did you
Yeah,
have enough time?
yes was, do you have enough time? And again, here's a graph that really breaks out the assessment. Oversight effectiveness is the highest bar, influence the second, fundraising effectiveness the third, and fundraising capacity. By capacity, we were asking for the ability to give or get gifts in the range of $25,000 over 5 years, payable over 5 years. So very high and high are these two colors right here. This green is where the neutral starts. And you can see on this graph, low and very low occupy way too much space on the graph.
So was the question asked as far as oversight effectiveness? I mean, what were the parameters for that? In other words, is the school operating in a fiscally responsible manner? Yes. Is it our communication is poor? I mean, so what were the parameters for?
Maybe, remember we had talked, maybe you could note that question,
okay,
and then we'll keep going.
Okay.
It may be answered, and then it may go away, but I think it'll help us to keep going.
We asked questions regarding the executive director, and the first point is there on the screen for you to see. You can probably just bring all of these on. Gwyneth, as you know, comes from an LAUSD background, which is regarded very highly both by the community and by LAUSD. So we were very, very pleased to hear from both communities about that relationship. You'll notice at the bottom, there's next to the bottom, there's a lack of role clarity around the ED's ability to be effective in all the duties that are outlined in her job description, and insufficient time in each day to really pursue each and every one of those responsibilities assigned to her. Significantly PR and development. With the teachers and the staff, it was acknowledged that there was a very, very high turnover rate among teachers and staff, the low retention rate you see there, and the broad range in effectiveness from great to poor. For this next representative comments, you see there we made a note, the staff includes workers in the office, lunchroom, playground, and classroom, and then the representative comments as related to those three categories. Yeah. And then this is a graph. The upper bar is the overall effectiveness of the executive director and the senior staff, which was, in this case, was measured as the browns. You can see 50%, just about 50% rating between highly effective and effective. Where the green starts there is the average. The lower bar measured the fundraising effectiveness of the executive director. So you can see again where the lime green starts is the average range. So we would certainly want that to be a little bit higher. We took a hard look at your current annual fundraising, and it's really, really very good for such a young school. You can see here the findings. Significant are those best practices that are not in place, database management, cultivation of major donors and relationships, and the school is not doing face-to-face solicitations in its asks for funds. So those are areas that would need to be improved.
I wanted to real quick address what Stephanie, right? Stephanie had said that, I think it was Stephanie that talked about the high cost of fundraising and a number of these. And that is very typical of an organization that's getting a lot of, doing a lot of their fundraising through events. Okay. So the critical best practices, when those are put into place, will improve your ratios.
Yeah. We tested what we call the case for support, which in this case was that idea of attaining a permanent facility of your own. And you can see here, some of the interviewees perceived a misalignment. Others challenged the existing mission. And some interviewees noted that the current mission supports strengthening and improving the existing TK5, and felt that prioritizing a new facility could distract from making any internal improvements in structure and organization. It was suggested by some interviewees that the school should be grown from the inside out. Again, the case for support. We tested, as Tissa mentioned, a $3 million range. But the costs that we were actually provided were somewhere between $3 and $25 million. So you can see the reactions to that. People felt that at this stage, any going further into your own facility and having that facility support could really, really impact future operating costs. And then I mentioned the specific goal. Here's some representative comments regarding the case. We can go. We tested a number of funding priorities in order to ascertain what was really important to people. And this first one on the left says financial support for school programming. The next one to the right is acquiring a facility. The third bar is professional staff development. And the fourth is funding for long-term sustainability and viability. You can see that acquiring a facility which is the second bar, was just over 30%. The most significant finding was the funding for the long-term sustainability and viability, which you can see there is just about 60% of the interviewees rated that as the highest priority. And this is the gift chart that we tested. We put it up here so that you'll see this is the number of gifts that we would need at each level to come out to a $3 million fundraising goal. And I can tell you that we fell significantly short of that. Just as an example, if you look at the $25,000 plus range, you can see here we would need 18 gifts. We were able to identify one. In the range of $50,000, we were able to identify one gift and no gifts at the higher levels.
Yes. So typically when we're doing the math, when we review the figures, for each one of the gifts on that gift chart, we'd like to see somewhere between 1 to 3 prospects. So when Nancy's reporting one gift at that level, we'd be looking, in the case of 15 gifts at the 50,000, we'd really like to hear the names of about 45 people. And so this is where, you know, the math on the gift chart really plays a role as we look at whether or not you can execute on a $3 million campaign.
One of the things that we look at to go into a fundraising campaign is the donor and volunteer base. And you can see here that we didn't have enough qualified donors. As John mentioned, we like to have 3 prospects for each gift. So the numbers simply weren't there. Insufficient major gift pool.
Sorry, but you only surveyed 45 people, so I mean, how many out of 45 would you expect to be in that category?
Well, I wouldn't.
It's not like we interviewed 4,000 people. We interviewed 45.
No, but we would have expected them to be able to identify people in those categories.
So they would be able to identify other people.
Yes, to have the connectedness.
Yeah.
Yes. The second green bullet point, I would just note that the concern about the lack of organization and leadership was mentioned by a number of interviewees who said until they saw some very tangible changes, they would not make a gift. And it was significant that 50% of the board members interviewed said they would not make a gift. All of you probably know that in fundraising, especially if you're going out into the broader community for foundation support, but almost at any level you need 100% of your board making gifts. And I'm going to ask John to do the recommendations.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us tonight. And I do want to echo what Tissa said, just our gratitude to the board for incredible hours that you put in for the school, and then the study advisory committee. We're now leaving what we received from you in the way of findings, and now we're moving into having gathered all that information. We sat down as a team and tried to build some recommendations about how you could best move forward in the next few months. And we'd like to urgently, do that. Let's get going to move ahead. One of the things you've heard from us so far is this is an incredible school. Very unique, very passionate parents, really good teachers. And what we're trying to do is identify some places where you can build your organizational capacity so that you can really launch on a campaign. So this is where we move from what we heard from you to what we came together for recommendations. The first, and this is very much based on that last bullet point about we did not see donors and we did not see volunteers that could sustain a $3 million campaign. So we're saying, hold on, let's delay the launch of a capital campaign for right now, and let's put into some order some steps for you that you can move forward on very quickly here. So the first part is that we'd like to recommend that you undertake a strategic planning process, and that's so great because you're already underway with investigating how the board can do that. We did have a chance to sit with the board in January and were part of a review of the strategic plan and made some recommendations at that time. But we are, in this report, recommending that you move forward with that process. And critical to, Nancy mentioned this tension, critical to bringing about a removal of that tension is developing this unified mission and vision. And that's going to use not only the board and the staff, but bringing together the constituents to really bring about 100% agreement about how this school is going to be moving forward. Clarifying the goals, that would be a critical part of that. And the other part that we saw when we were reviewing it is accountability. So who's going to get the work done that's built into the strategic plan, and on what basis of a timeline. And so we'd like to recommend that as part of that, you have some outside counsel that will help usher you through that process. The second part you saw, there were some concerns about effectiveness of the board. I do want to say that this is a board that we saw very committed to these board meetings and really serving the needs of the parents and the teachers. And we were really specifically looking at the fundraising function here. So when we're saying effectiveness, it is oversight, but it is also that part that we were testing feasibility of a capital campaign. So this feedback is specific to that. We want to increase the understanding of an effective relationship and a partnership and a nonprofit organization between the executive director and the board, and how does that work function together. Establish some role clarity, some clear organizational structure, and then this accountability piece that I mentioned earlier. Really look at the job descriptions, make sure that that work is being done and that it is appropriate. And then training of the staff and volunteers. And this would be sitting alongside fellow board members in other organizations that have effective boards, learning from that experience, and then the same thing with the staff, sitting alongside professional development officers, professional fundraisers, and really picking up the tools that are needed to carry out effective fundraising for the school.
Can I address?
Sure.
One of the comments, and we see this with a lot of organizations, and I don't remember if it's John or Frank that commented when we were doing some pre-review. In reality, what the board is doing, and has already demonstrated tonight with that whole thing about who hires and fires whom, you know, on the staff, it was excellent. You're really moving from a founding board, where the board gets highly involved in operations, to a governing model. And what we're saying is these things, getting these things into place can help you with that movement from some of the things that a founders board does to more of a governance model.
Thanks, Tessa. We do think it's important to increase the board size to the maximum level possible. And that, what we would recommend is a board development tool called a matrix. Really look at the pluses and minuses of the current membership, look at the pieces that are potentially missing, and try to identify individuals. And then the critical part, and you'll hear this a couple times, that cultivation of those people, bringing them in, engaging them into the school, and inviting them then to take part on the board. Again, work is already going on here to establish standing committees. This is about utilizing everybody's strengths and skills, and the committees allow us an opportunity to look in and sort of see those people that could bring effective leadership standards to the board. Engage in efforts to unify the board's vision. Again, conversation, strategic planning, moving forward in those areas. And then there is a very clear role that board members play in fundraising and also serving as ambassadors in the community. And we'd like to make sure that those are very clear, and there's marching orders each year about how does the board serve the school in those areas. And then one of the interesting things in the findings was, at this particular point, based on the case we presented, there was not 100% backing of supporting the campaign. And so what we'd like to do is advance a plan that everybody embraces, and then the board is typically the first person or first group that says we're behind this plan 100%, and we're so behind it that we're going to make a gift in support of it. And so we'd like to see 100% participation by board members in any major fundraising activity that happens. Like on the board, we also want to implement some best practices on the staff. And this is really primarily directed at the executive director's office. So we want to clarify the role of the executive director, particularly her role in public relations and fundraising. And what we like to see when we're going into a capital campaign is that the executive director could allow 50% of their time to be dedicated to such an exercise. And right now, you know that your executive director is working very, very hard, and trying to figure out where that 50% is going to come from is going to be difficult. So we're going to try to work with board and staff to figure out how do we aim that in the right direction. And then implement some personalized training, and this is to give the executive director position knowledge in best donor cultivation techniques, messaging, and clarifying what those messages are to put out to potential supporters, and then some best practices as far as solicitation and stewardship. And you heard earlier some discussion about, where are those funds going to come from? And one of the things that we would put forward is a real focus on face-to-face major individual gift getting. And I know a lot of times we like to get our eyes on the corporations and the foundations, but what we find, especially in major gift getting, is those relationships with individuals will potentially lead to some of those gifts from corporations and foundations. But that one-on-one relationship building between the school, primarily represented in the executive director position, moving out and developing individual relationships is the way to really get at that major gift pool. It was a surprise to us that we didn't see an active development database here, and so we are recommending that that be part of implementation. It's critically important that the administration has an ability to be able to both track and record gifts coming into the school. Continue to improve this image, and we did target two groups, or we heard from you, and we do believe that we would recommend to you to continue to build a solid relationship with LAUSD. And this is all points out all the time, constant communication, constant relationship building by both parents, board members, staff, the whole deal. And then certainly with the Goethe connection and the IB program and the language program, there's certainly evidence to say that the German community, German-American community, and I think this is really where we can do some aiming in the right direction, the international, there's just the LA international community. This is an incredible gift to LA, this school. And to be able to put that out in front of this, this community that is so international, you've got a great argument to make, and it's to a pool of people that potentially have resources that really could come to bear for the school. And this is our last recommendation. This is also timeline-wise the last piece that we would probably put into place. But this is the idea of really having a plan, a written document that clarifies how communication is going to happen within the school, internally and also externally. And thanks to the Study Advisory Committee and their probing questions of us, we wanted to make sure you had a timeline to move forward on. And so we've got the four major recommendations: strategic planning, board development, fundraising program, and communications plan along the left side. And then four potential phases. The red is a planning stage. With the strategic planning, there's still a little piece of research that needs to be done. And then development is the internal development of those parts, and then the implementation plan. And you can see that, once the board development feature is added, and once the executive coaching feature is added, we'd like to see that play out. That is the full report. And at this particular time, we'd like to stop and take questions. I once again just want to say that this is what we see here is an incredible school. poised after 6 years to do some incredible things in Los Angeles. And this is not time to build a building, but it is time to get everybody aimed in exactly the same direction. Parents, educators, and then the community that you touch in LA, and move you all together. And it's very doable. We're very excited about the next couple of months, and hope we can be of assistance to you. So at this time, I think the group will take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much.
Tara, do you still have your question from before?
No, I think the answer to my question was that you were specifically looking at our effectiveness to fundraise.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
When you looked at the number of people that were not part of the inner circle, you said approximately 47%, I think, is that group. And what seems to me to be a sort of an oxymoron is that they don't know much about the school, and yet how much weight should we put in for what they think about whether the school is poised to do the things? I don't have really a question, it's an observation.
No, it's a really good question. It's because it'll help everybody understand the context of those 44 individuals we talked to. When we sat down with the study advisory committee, we said we would like to hear from those people who actually can evaluate the school on a number of pieces, both the image of it, also what its plans are, and their point of view. And it was the study advisory committee that identified those people that weren't inner circle people. I think and so you have a very strong alliance of that group that's not inner circle. These are people who are supporting charter school movement, they're in the LAUSD, they're promoters of supporting education. There were a number of people on the study advisory committee that were very targeted in who they thought of outside of that inner circle. And so you're not hearing from people who have no knowledge of Goethe International Charter School. You're hearing from people who really know the school in its context. There were definitely some questions where there was a group that said, we really don't know the answer. And when we provide the ratings, you're seeing that group as the last group when they just say, we don't know, we can't weigh in. And it's actually throughout each of those finding grids, there are a couple of places where they really said, I don't know. The comparative piece was hard for some people to identify. But for the most part, we got very candid, very clear, concise answers from the group. Yep.
Follow-up question is, do you weigh the feedback of the 44 people equally? Do you see, did you feel that, or do you sense that in feedback that you get, that if you were to segment people into, passive supporters, sort of mid and sort of really advanced supporters.
Right.
Do you feel any difference in that segmentation?
Yeah. What happens when we finally get all the information from everyone, our special services staff takes those findings and that data, and they do a number of cross-sections just to make sure that the information is consistent across all groups that we're talking to. And so when we meet to discuss the findings, our special service staff sit down with us and say, these are the places where we saw some inconsistencies, or these are the places where we want to alert you that we weren't seeing a similar pattern. And that's really their function, because they weren't at the interviews. They were participants in the process that aren't affected by anything other than what they're seeing in the data. And they bring then that knowledge to us, and then we use that as we formulate the recommendations. So you might not necessarily see it evidenced, although I found in some of the representative comments, you could see where people would go a couple of different directions. Yeah.
What's a typical
I'm sorry, you know what, we're not going to open it up for questions, because it is a board meeting still, and it's not a town hall meeting. I apologize, it's very frustrating for me too, but we're just going to stick with the decorum. Sorry.
I think it gets confusing because Alex is sitting over
Yeah,
there.
Sorry, I just need fresh.
Yeah, it's warm, I know.
We can.
I have more questions before
We opened that door.
Alex, go ahead.
Is that good?
Yeah, Alex.
Okay. Have you done a comparable survey for another organization at the same stage of development as us? In terms of our life cycle, would you say you have done this for another organization at our pivoting point?
Yeah, and it is interesting too how those sort of life cycles cross over. One, there's some true life cycles within the nonprofit sector, but then also the charter schools, and Nancy was our specialist and really took a look at the charter schools in LA and took a look at them comparatively. What's happening is that initial phase for nonprofits is taking longer. There's competition from on a donor level, and first and foremost, there's competition from a volunteer basis. So what used to be accomplished in 6 years might take 10 years now. It's the timeline stretching out a little bit. But what I think we all want you to hear is, for an organization that's 6 years in, it's incredible what you're doing. I mean, both from just an annual fundraising basis, but also just how engaged everybody is in the dialogue it's really incredible. The place that we see some potential for growth is that next layer. Who's on that circle outside of the inner circle? That relationship to Los Angeles, the next focus area is really going to probably be, especially on the fundraising piece.
So what is the timeline now? So obviously we've gotten your recommendations and we need to mull them over and absorb them. And so will the next phase now be the hows? How do we get these things that you're recommending we do? Like, for example, building a database and targeting donors.
Right.
I mean, that's going to require an investment on the part of the school.
Right. There are some things that we're recommending that there be some counsel for, but there are also things we're recommending that we think the board and the staff are quite positioned to be able to move forward with. So, there's some clarity about that.
So your quarter-time development person.
Yeah, fits right in.
Fits right in.
Yeah.
But I think your recommendation is that the school is not ready to hire a full-time development director.
Well, we know that the philanthropic community is going to be very interested in spending time with your executive director. That first and foremost, that relationship needs to be established, and then there's going to be some clarity at that point about those things that can be moved ahead with Gwennis, and those things that would need to be moved ahead with a staff person or counsel. And I think what we're advising is, let's get best practices for the executive director in place and best practices for the volunteer leadership of the organization in place. Get that going in a direction towards success, and then it'll be very clear where the staffing piece is needed. Yeah.
My final question for tonight is, I apologize, is based on the administration org chart that you heard me presented this evening, and you've had a lot of chance to interact with the school. Do you feel that that plan allows the executive director to gain 50% free time to dedicate towards what you advocate for to spend
Right.
on?
The 50% marker, just to clarify, is the marker we're looking at if we're going into like a major $3 million capital campaign And so I think what we'd like to do is move you in that direction. And I think we heard earlier in the board meeting about some steps that staff is taking, or administration is taking, to make it possible for Gwyneth to dedicate some time to public relations and development. I think that's the right direction, and some clarity about that will come into focus soon.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment. I think the most critical piece of it, which condenses everything, is ultimately the communication plan, because it has the written mission and the written vision and mission statement, the revised one, the updated one. It kind of puts out the entire thought process in a document and condenses it and can be used as a guideline. I find, my observation is that I find the timeline very ambitious.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Summer, yeah.
Considering that we're all traveling this summer. Yeah, and you. Yes, I do.
It is.
But it's very, I think it's very challenging, and if it takes like 2 months longer, I don't think it hurts. Yeah. If we look at it like this, if it takes until December or before the end of the winter break,
right. So push it.
So it doesn't matter as long as the homework which goes into the role clarification, all these things is done proper. And I'd like to spend rather more time on the really bifurcation of duties,
right.
And to get clarity on the concept, and then to move on a plan forward rather than rushing it through it and just to meet a deadline.
Right.
So it's not in our best interest.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And we did some linear work on each of these pieces. And just to give you a sense, with the strategic planning, that first step would just be getting the recruiting the planning task force as quickly as possible. Yeah. So obviously, we're saying that should be in June as quickly as possible. Let's gather that group together. There would be some strategic planning sessions. I'd like to try to get that. That would be worth working with the recruitment, with the task force, excuse me. There is some analyzing of data, and your council would be doing that, so gathering all that information and then taking that, analyzing it, preparing a draft of the plan. Again, that work can be done behind the scenes. And then moving into the implementation of the plan. And for each of these, some detail exists for step by step, so that you can, if something stretches out a little bit, at least you know that you don't have to go into it.
So can I ask a follow-up question in regard to the the communication plan, which again boils it down to me, and it's also the engagement of a political consultant in regards to get a charter approval, because you mentioned in your presentation. Do you think that the deliverables after your study will be good enough to, as a foundation, to engage political consultants and to come up with a media plan towards that, to hit board members and stuff like that?
Yeah. And I think there's that piece, but I think the other part of the recommendation is there were 44 voices that were a part of this process, and how the school comes back to those individuals and reports where things are going and how they can help in moving this agenda. Because, I hope you saw that that first section of the findings are suggestions that we're getting from the community of people that we interviewed. And so coming back to those individuals and saying, these are the things we're moving forward with, these are the things we need your help with, these are the things we're putting on hold until we're in the right place.
So is there also a part of the process? Is there also, there's expectations everywhere. If you ask 10 people, you get 10 opinions. But what is the validity of these, of the expectations, and how realistic are they? Is there a loop in there where we can say, okay, we can say no, yes, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think that's the piece that is pushing us to recommend the strategic planning process. That mission vision argument is so important that it's everybody's mission vision argument. And so I think that's where some of that comes in.
I think you can make it. You can try to be all inclusive, or you be like 80% 100% inclusive.
I appreciate that too. And our coaching in that situation is take all the suggestions.
Right.
And when you make a decision as a board not to move forward, you have a requirement. And that requirement is to come back to the community and explain, we're not moving forward, and this is why we're not moving forward. And also, even a better answer is, we're not moving forward right now because we have a priority over here that we have to get done. And then once that's done, the pieces of the puzzle are going to fit into place, and we're going to be able to get that work done much more efficiently in the future. So I think just to keep that, and that's what we heard tonight, keep that door open. Yeah.
Just a comment more than a question, but a comment and a question. The thing that surprised me the most in what you reported was that there was somehow the school needed to develop a unified mission and vision. That surprises me because I've always understood this school to be very clear in its vision and mission. So I've been away for a couple of years, but nonetheless, I think it's so, I don't think that is going to be the hard project. I may be wrong, but I don't think, I mean, despite the fact that I know that there are some comments about it, but I think that for me, the question is the profile of the school in the wider community and in relationship with LAUSD, call it PR if you will, and your recommendations do suggest ways in which the executive director can take on that task. But it's a really large task.
Right.
And so I would like to hear more suggestions, perhaps, of how that PR piece can be carried out most effectively. Because without the PR, the fundraising will follow after that. So I just, I think for me the most interesting question is, when we talk about roles, is who is engaged in PR, and are we talking about sort of concentric circles of people, the ED at the center, the board, volunteers, every single person who's ever been or been involved in Goethe, our own children, wearing their Goethe t-shirts still when they go to, I don't know what it is, but
yes.
I mean, I think everyone who's been associated with Goethe has an obligation in that PR, or has a role to play in that project. And so I guess to me that is the really interesting question.
I think I feel the same way about the mission and vision, but it doesn't hurt to revisit it at least.
I take a completely different view. As stated, the mission and vision is quite generic, and if you look at the respondents here, people are confused about what our mission is. There are people that say German, people that say IB. They're not mutually exclusive, but their respondents shouldn't necessarily be responding in that way if we had a unified and universally understood and embraced mission and vision. And I think that, it's almost, when I rate a mission statement, I look at, how this company is, or this organization is unique and fulfilling a very, very specific goal and societal need. And I think we have a very general, very positive, very good sense of what our mission is, but it's not specific enough. It doesn't set us apart, and it doesn't say, mission and vision, and then at the bottom in your brain you go, therefore I want to give money to those people. Therefore I want to send my kids there. Therefore I think that's the best organization I've ever heard of. I think that's the missing thing, and I think that's going to unify internally and also broadcast an image that that we want to broadcast.
So I think I would agree with you that there's some work to be done on the language. I also want to, what I'm feeling, what I've been struggling with is the fact that we're doing all these intellectually we have all this loaded deck, right? It's it's IB and it's immersion and it's Common Core and and then it's all of these things together, and we're trying to squeeze that in 180 school days and all that kind of stuff. And let's think about it, whether this is all mutually, is it maybe that's too much of a stretch goal?
I don't think what we're doing is too hard. I think the task is how to describe it. It would have been great for the last couple of months if we'd worked on mission and vision statements. Yes. Wink, wink. Anyway.
For the communication plan, do you think that's done by the school, or
by a specialist. Provided you get the fantastic, we get the fantastic strategic plan. Who works on the communication plan?
I think it would be helpful to have some outside counsel for that.
Right. That's not part of your bid, though. Right?
It's not.
And how much do you think a school like ours, a non-profit like ours, should be spending on a communication plan?
Because we have 10,000 in the budget.
Which, no, because you don't have an answer right now, we really would love to hear a figure.
Let us do a little research.
Yeah, I think,
because a lot of it is one of your size and one of your scope. So I think we would probably want to look at it, because it's not just any nonprofit. You know, some nonprofits have.
Right.
No, for an organization.
I think the other thing is, are you bringing in somebody to do the plan, or are you bringing in somebody who can work the plan for you? I mean, because there are both.
Right. I had a conversation with somebody who I know, and I said, listen, would you be able to, to do a media plan or a communication plan? I said, sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of my clients just launched, they're in their first year of operation. And they couldn't hire a staff person to do the communications work. But they were able to find somebody that could really work as a partner alongside the executive director. And that winds up being a very different piece of math than bringing in somebody just to do the plan.
Well, and I think one of the things we talked about when we met together is there are internal communications and there are external.
Yeah.
And your internal communications could use some work, because there's transparency, and then there's sometimes information run amok that causes divisiveness. And so that was the recommendation that's in just before this about communications is about oversight and policy, about how that, what John was talking about, report back when an action takes place, how that happens within your community in an orderly fashion, so that it's not just half the story, that it's the whole story, that it's et cetera. So there's that internal part that I think we would like to have addressed as a part of this whole governance or development thing, and then there's the external part where you get the message out that you might want to engage some help with that, of more of a media type of person. So one is a bit more of a governance thing, and the other is more of an external media plan.
May I just challenge your assumptions for a second? There is sort of bottoms up building, and there's tops down, right?
Yeah.
And so I think no matter what amount of strategic planning we do, it doesn't change the value propositions that we offer as a school. And I say that based on what you say, your observations are, what a great school we are in terms of within the broader community, right? So if that being the case, that our value proposition is so strong, why should there not be a communications plan right now, immediately starting, whether it's paid for or internal, that would begin an external communications plan that only communicates our value propositions as opposed to what we intend to do 5 or 10 years out, what we are currently doing.
Right. And
where is the
where you're hearing our recommendations is that we think there's a couple of steps that need to be taken in order to be able to empower that communications plan. So clarity around role of executive director, clarity around role of board, and having this plan in place are critical first steps. If the mission vision doesn't have clarity, then there isn't a communications plan that can put that message out. So we were just seeing there being a way to roll this out with priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, and then what we see as very important, but some steps that had to be taken before you could get there. So that's where it unrolls.
At the risk of oversimplifying, I think if you hired a media consultant and they got 5 people in the room, you would have 2 people that would say, we're a German immersion school and that's what you need to promote. And you'd have two people that would say, we're an IB school, and that is absolutely what you need to promote. That's the most important thing about Goethe. And you'd have one person that would say, no, we're all about Common Core, and that's really what you need to promote. And that's an issue for you. And so that's what we see the strategic planning process is an opportunity.
Hold on a second. Can I just say something? This perfectly highlights what I found in the surveys. Everything that you talked about, the tensions, I mean, we go back to such a basic place that we need to go, basically, to redefine who we are.
And in the interest of time, let's try to wrap up, because I think we're all coming to fundamental positions that we may not agree on, but that are very fundamental. Did you want to follow up?
Sorry, I interrupted you.
I just want to understand your sort of organizational philosophy of the topics. Right. I don't see personally, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any downside on communicating the attributes of an IB school. I don't see how that's detrimental, even if the fifth person thinks about Common Core. I don't see communications regarding IB being counterproductive to the school's positioning in the marketplace. So hence, why not?
Well, you are communicating that in the marketplace. I mean, there are ways that you are currently communicating. So that first step, or the action of the school, is already in communication mode. What we're saying is there's a couple of steps, and then to execute on a plan. It's really about a focused effort for the whole community, their role clarity, and getting this message out.
Can I make one comment? It's consistent with academic handbooks, right? If the academic says you start with the mission and you end up with the media plan, which is then saying who is actually in charge of doing it. I mean, it's considered top down. I mean, that's strategic marketing. It goes from here to there. And the bottleneck is the strategic marketing, the strategic communication plan, and who is and the responsibility associated with it. So I think it's consistent. I would be like, from a more pragmatical person, I think we could do the last one already, but this is also consensus building.
Well, remember, we're also talking about kind of two different things. I mean, there's recruiting students, and there's, and then there's communicating with really rich people who need a really strong pitch. So I think it's sort of two different pitches.
It is different.
Show, any more comments or questions? So as part of this, we have as in your board packet an actual resolution. Did you want to read that, or shall I? Okay, so the study advisory committee has received the goal feasibility study report. So we're going to all vote on this in a minute. So listen up. Based on Netzel Grigsby's professional assessment of Goethe and their findings, based on confidential responses from 44 valued stakeholders, they presented us with the following recommendations. Okay, so these are 5 recommendations that we're going to all agree to accept and act upon, or not. So, listen and see if there's something you disagree with.
What point of order? We're voting on the content and actions, or are we simply receiving the recommendations?
You're voting on the 5 action items that I'm going to read.
I'm trying to get this right. So we're voting on, in fact, not just receiving the recommendations, but committing to carrying out these specific 5 recommendations.
Correct. So the first one is delay the launch of a capital campaign for the acquisition of a permanent site. Number 2 is undertake a strategic planning process to develop a unified mission, vision, and goals for Goethe. 3, implement steps to improve board effectiveness. 4, implement best practices in Goethe's fundraising activities. 5, establish and implement a clear communication plan.
But how are we to vote on adopting this if we don't know the hows of how we're going to?
So this is really, really important. What you may have observed in the way we conduct business is we have great conversations, and we talk about the same things over and over. And so this is an attempt to codify and to record in our minutes what we're all agreeing to do, okay? How we're gonna get there, we're not exactly sure how we're gonna get there, but we're all saying, we're gonna do this. So 2 meetings from now, you can't come to the meeting and say, we don't need to implement best practices in GICS fundraising activities. That's a waste of time. It will be recorded, and we will figure out how to do this. We will return to these again and again. Maybe there's something here that you don't agree with, and you think, we don't need that. Now's the time to raise your voice.
Has a motion been made?
No. I
Is it
can.
what?
Well, I mean, no, I'm just saying, because are we going to discuss it? I mean, how if
Normally, we don't make the motion first. You're right, we should, in Robert's rules.
Well,
but
isn't
now
it
is the
motion,
time to
second,
discuss.
and then discussion?
Yes, we've just never worked that way.
Okay.
Would someone like to make a motion?
We know what, I'll make a motion to adopt this.
Okay, so let's have discussion then.
Do we have a second?
Sorry, is there a second? I will second it.
Okay, so now we can have discussion.
Look at this.
So the report had a number of recommendations. I'm just wondering, as a process question, how is it that these 5 were selected from the recommendations to seek our commitment?
That was the last slide, right? So there were five recommendations made. That was the net conclusion. So the communication plan wouldn't begin until the strategic plan was completed.
Okay.
So the implementation could begin with the communication plan at the same time.
Am I assuming that
You
PR
could
is
adjust the
included?
timing however you wanted. It's that you would have
No,
to
but based on
respond
your
to this.
recommendations, you mentioned that that could happen and the board development could happen in parallel to the strategic plan.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
How we would do that over the summer months for board development would be interesting. But if you feel that it can be done, then we should commit to doing it.
Well, we also don't even have the best practices yet, so if we put a timeline of June to September, when are we gonna get the best practices, and then we only have like a month or 2 to implement them? I don't know.
So let's simplify this. This doesn't have a timeline. This is just saying, we want to do these things. So the question is, do you want to do these things, board? I'm not going to do them because I'm not going to be here. Do you want to do them? Actually, I will be part of this process, so you can't get rid of me so quickly.
How so?
Oh, man.
Explain. How so?
There's going to be a task force, strategic.
So, okay.
Yeah, strategic planning task force.
I wanted you to explain.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
So it's all about getting the right people into the task force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
politically
No,
speaking.
these things all make sense.
so
and-
great questions though. I don't want to cut you off.
So we're agreeing to this without the timeline necessarily, not a strict timeline, like it might be a few months later if the recommendations come and we need some time to implement them.
That we're not bound to that timeline at all. That was a theoretical timeline, a possibility. This is what we're binding ourselves to.
I'm not saying we want to languish either, but
It's a fine line, isn't it? Okay, we're ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor of, all those in favor of accepting and moving forward with recommendation of the Study Advisory Committee, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great, thank you very much, and thank you all so much for your work. It's in the board packet.
Where is it?
Under this agenda item, under 5D. It's on in the Dropbox. Thank you. And thank you all. I think that was fantastic. Good process.
Me too. Yeah, we need like a 5 minutes, whatever.
Okay, 2-minute break. 2-minute break. Time out. 2-minute break. We are at item 5E, engage strategic planning consultant. It's listed. I'm listed as the person leading, but actually Tara and I worked on that. Tara will go ahead and lead the discussion on that. And we've allocated 10 minutes, so let's see if we can do that.
Okay. So we received 3 proposals for the strategic plan. Insight Education, Third Plateau Social Impact Strategies, and Netzel Grigsby. So you've hopefully had a chance to see the matrix where I evaluated all 3 proposals.
based on a variety of parameters, experience with charter schools, experience with Goethe, their years of experience in general, experience with real estate, stakeholder input, and their implementation plan, and then finally cost. So after evaluating all three of the proposals, I believe that we would get the best value and product out of working with Netzel Grigsby. Not only do they already know us and they've done a really deep analysis with us already, so they already have the benefit of that knowledge. Their pricing was, you know, very competitive. It was cheaper than the other proposals. Because, you know, probably we're getting some of that benefit of all the work they've already done with us. They've worked with charter schools. They clearly understand us. And I thought of the three proposals, theirs was the most detailed as far as how they were going to implement the strategic planning process. So yeah, those are my thoughts. So I don't know if anyone has questions about the proposals.
You want to highlight the costs one more time, comparatively?
Yeah, you know, I did, the matrix didn't actually have the costs, so I can tell you, I can just look real quick.
I'll look at third plateau. If you look at,
okay. Yeah, the third plateau proposal just didn't have a lot of information in general, so it was really hard to even evaluate them, so I extrapolated the best I could.
So third plateau says 45,000. They estimate 5 to 6 months from start to end, and expenses no more than 5,000, so 50,000.
Yeah, whereas Netzel Grigsby's half of that at 24,500.
Okay, and this one, the other insight was not qualified enough.
That one, no, I don't believe so.
All right.
And also, we should mention as part of the process, Gwenna spoke with representatives from all of these firms just for that sort of personal touch. And I think it was last month or the month before, you had positive things to say about all of them on the personal level, and then this is sort of the next level of analysis.
Other questions?
Do we motion? My motion? What is our motion?
Sorry, yes. Let's continue with that good practice.
Sorry.
This is great. So I should have done that before. I apologize. So is there a motion on this item?
So the motion is to move forward with next.
No, the motion is just to have discussion, but we're going to get into this good practice.
The motion is to move forward with Grigsby, NG.
Well, to enter into a contract.
To entering into a contract.
For strategic planning.
For strategic planning. Yeah. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there are 2 seconds.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So then we can have discussion.
Thank you.
I want to just make sure that they go into more depth than they did tonight. Why are you laughing?
No, I think you say it so nicely. I would have never said it that
Okay. I want us to be really specific about the deliverables that we want from them out of this.
So,
and I read it. I felt like there were certain areas tonight that I would have preferred them to have extrapolated on. And so I want to make sure if we're going to put this type of money to the same company again, that we get more in-depth analysis. And maybe I felt that way because I just got done spending hours and hours in the last month on surveys, but a lot of the information that I heard tonight, I knew. And so with that, I just want to make sure this is money well spent. So that's what I want to say publicly.
And I think all the roads led to the fact that strategic planning is clearly something that is missing as far as the unified mission and vision. So I think this seems like the absolute right next step for us.
anyone have a dissenting view?
I don't really have a dissenting view. Obviously from the last month, the picture has changed considerably in terms of the board composition. I was hoping that maybe some of the parent representatives who are stepping off the board may consider want to run for the board position, independent of their role as a parent in the school. That's not, it doesn't seem that that's happening. John is saying he will be involved in the strategic planning process, but I really don't know if that's something that, despite the best of intentions, how much he can give and the junctions in which the process is going to be carried out. If, for example, we were going to sit down 4 days, 4 consecutive days, or 4 days that people, the board members, would give up 1 day per week and get together for 4 to 5 weeks in a row and develop it, I think that's more bankable. Just based on history, I feel that we need a facilitator to make the strategic planning come together, because I don't think there is a facilitator within the board that could make that happen. And so if I were to peg it in terms of facilitator time, I think having 3 facilitators is an overkill. I think 1 facilitator, and even if their rate is $200 an hour, $1,600 a day, maximum $2,000 a day, over 5 days, where they assign us work and we get it done. I can see 5 to 6 months easily running into 10 months because of people's availability. I can see then finishing with a product which may just be kind of a lukewarm type product. I think if we followed, so I advocated for an external company because people pay a lot more attention when, let's say, KPMG does the audit of someone's books than if Mr. Joe Smith's accounting company does an audit. So the reputation of the firms you retain increases your credibility, pointing towards the board member that you recommended to the board. So I think we do need the involvement of an organization like Netzel Grigsby. I don't think we need it as much in the strategic planning process as we do in terms of actually the pieces of coaching either the executive director and the board members on how to be better fundraising people. So it's not just the executive director that needs that experience. So I just don't think we should take 5 to 6 months to do it. Based on last board's meeting about there's a large constituency of the school that wants to scale, and so my preference is their involvement, but over a much shorter period of time, and for the board to do the heavy lifting, plus members of the parent community. It shouldn't be just the board that comes up with the strategic plan, whether it's the founding parents or people who are very active in the school community who understand that. That would be the path that I would advocate for. I think again, to finalize, I think we run the risk of just achieving mediocrity over a 5-month period where people just get worn out by where we are in that process.
My opinion on this one is similar. Let's get somebody in and just like drive the process. You know, I think the work product definitely does need some improvement. I would agree with you. I think it's a little bit non-committal, but it's directionally correct, I would say. But other than that, yeah, I think it's the lowest bid. So I would, I think they know the school. Getting somebody else in, the learning curve for Spark is just far too long. It's like involving all of us. So they are starting from why I feel there's a little bit of tying between this contract and the other contract. It's my personal observation. I think it's okay because they're really coming in with the right intentions to improve it. And so.
Well, we're saving $20,000 or so.
Yes, but when you look at collectively, from the initial stage to that, so initial stage to that, plus you have to have a media planner afterwards to engage to that. That's probably a $50,000 job. If the work product is good, I think it's money well spent.
Well, remember their initial study, this was an initial feasibility study. This was not a full-blown capital campaign assessment. So while I agree with you that it was pretty surface, I mean, that's kind of what we paid for. We didn't pay for it full-blown.
I don't think we need more than that, honestly. I don't think we need more than that. When we start digging more deeply, we start debating, we start getting into coefficients of probability, it doesn't matter. We need to move the ship, you know, and that's what we're getting from them. They're saying, you want to raise money? We raise money all the time. Here's how you do it. You know.
I just wanted to correct Tara. We paid for a full capital campaign feasibility study.
Yeah, not a capital campaign launch.
Not a capital campaign launch.
Right. We paid for the food. We did the mini program first, and then saw that we needed to go further.
Right.
So,
the study, but not the campaign. Right.
In the proposal, the only piece that I'm maybe one might want to negotiate a little bit more, following up on what Alex said, is the preparation of a written plan. I mean, I would like to see a plan that doesn't stop with goals, but rather has some coaching elements embedded into it. It's very really naming the best practices that are to be implemented and the coaching. So
I think it sort of talks about that, provide input for objectives and strategies to be included. So.
Yeah. Because I think this part is going to be the part that we need the most help with.
Which is this part?
Well, the how-to. We need a little more input in the how-tos. It provided input for objectives and strategies to be included in the plan.
Okay.
It's not numbered out. It's under recruit strategic planning task force. I think that's what we're paying for.
And I also think, I mean, condensing the message too, that you can get it down to an elevator pitch. You know, mission and vision, and it's you know, if that is the work product, I think it's a good product, right?
And it's also up to us to say this is what we want. we want to have some nuts and bolts things.
Right. And so if they, I mean, it's basically getting access to we paid for getting access to their spreadsheet there, which was, you know, the spreadsheet, you need this and this and this and this. Nobody knew this before. They have it. This is with consultants everywhere. They have the cans. They sell it to different people, but in order to get access to the can, you need to pay for it unless somebody is giving it to you for free. And so,
but people don't listen for free.
You know.
So I do want to just, full disclosure, I'm actually going to abstain from this vote because I have a prior relationship with Nancy Ackerman. I actually did quite a bit of strategic planning with her in the church context. She led strategic planning for us, and it was very successful. So I'm very comfortable with it, but I feel that my prior relationship, which is
It's a really good point, and I think all of us on the board should probably do the same, because we also engaged her in this whole process and paid $35,000. It's a joke, but I appreciate that you're doing that. I think it's totally unnecessary. But
no, but also she's a friend.
We all know people in the world. And
no,
so
but I have a
personal.
I have a personal relationship with her that grows out of past professional relationships.
There is nothing in any of the conflict of interest laws in California that disqualify you from voting, but I appreciate that.
And also, most of the heavy lifting is not by the other two. She's more of the sort of the client, right?
Well, she did half the interviews, and Jahn did half the interviews.
She is.
I think she'd be the.
She's the intellectual workhorse,
yeah,
for sure.
I mean, workhorse, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what does Gwennis think about the proposal?
I agree with Netzel Grigsby.
And as they've presented it, 5-month project or?
To be determined. You know, I think I thought it was pretty aggressive timeline myself. To be determined.
Now, there were a couple of elements of what people wanted. You wanted a more expedited pipeline. You wanted a more detailed who's going to take this up with Netzel Grigsby if we're now voting on the standard blanket strategic planning agreement and saying, yes, we want the standard blanket, but we want the following.
I don't think, for you to decide, I suppose, but it seemed to me, last time we did this, you know, we signed them on, they came in and said, okay, here's how we do things, we got this committee together, and then we started getting into the details. Is that an acceptable way to continue? So Buenos is the primary point of contact. They come back, say, you know, how they propose to proceed, and we go from there.
So we're not developing an agenda, an action point out of this?
I don't think we need to.
Okay, just asking.
Okay, any more comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor of engaging Netzel Grigsby and Associates? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And one abstention. Okay, great. All right, thank you. Okay, Gwen's approval of the LCAP.
Okay, the local control funding formula that we receive those monies requires an LCAP. It is an annual comprehensive planning tool that not only describes actions based on state priorities, but also expenditures and relationships to those actions. If you recall, you approved the LCAP last year at this time, and it is a sliding 3-year plan. So every year, the goals move forward to another set of 3 years. There are 3 state priorities that must be addressed in the LCAP. They are conditions of learning, pupil outcomes, and engagements. We have addressed all 3 of those in this plan. And they are written, the goals then, as the goals that pertain to those priorities must be goals that are not just for significant subgroups, but also for all students. Our significant subgroups at our school are our special education students, our low-income students, and our English learners. I think when Betty and I sat down with the staff and we began looking at the goals that we had last year, we decided that they were very good goals. They were very comprehensive, and we carried those goals forward. We did not develop new ones, and you do not need to do that. Under conditions of learning, the first state priority, we have 4 goals. They are basic, and that is our highly qualified teacher status. That includes credentialing, proper credentialing of all teachers, not just our English teachers, but our German teachers who require a series of credentialing upon entering a U.S. classroom. And the other one is our B-CLAD for all immersion teachers require special B-CLAD certification. The second goal is the implementation of the Common Core standards. And we will be focusing on that, and not just with professional development for our staff, but unpacking, as I said earlier, the Common Core and putting it into an inquiry. Is there a roach in here?
Lift up your feet.
Oh, don't kill him. Don't go backwards.
Somebody released that to close the board meeting.
For our teachers in regard to how to look at the ELD standards, the framework, understand them, and implement them in their teaching. And those all go under the first priority, which are the conditions of learning. The second state priority is pupil outcomes, and we've retained the same goal that we had last year, and that's to have extended day programs. We're tweaking it a little bit to have more funding to actually provide after-school programs, first to include the duties of the language coordinator, because the language coordinator will specifically be working not just with the German language program, which will be the bulk of their duties, but also for our English learners, because they are learners of English too. And for us, we have close to 30% of our students have Spanish as their first language. And so when you look at that, significantly higher probably than Stephanie, than when you were here. And when you look at that, that 30% of our students are coming here with Spanish as their first language. That also needs to be a priority of the language coordinator. Yes, we want to focus on the German immersion, but we can't forget our English learners, especially when the LCAP specifically says, what are you doing to address the needs of your significant subgroup? And that is now a significant subgroup, these 30%. So we'll be looking at extended day for academic intervention and using our language coordinator to coordinate that program. And last is our engagement priorities, and there are 3 really good ones. Carrying forward parent involvement, so we'll be increasing resources using the funding to translate. Our goal next year is not to just translate communication in Spanish that goes home, and we're not always so good about doing that. So we really need to focus on translating our documents in Spanish, as well as in German. We should be putting up on our website significant documents in both languages, so that funding will go for translation.
Great.
And not just materials, but also interpreting at meetings. So we have begun, we did have a Spanish interpreter for a while at the GPA monthly meetings, and we want to see that we have funding to actually make that a little stipend for someone that wants to do that. So that's what the funding will go for. The second goal under engagement will be increasing student achievement. And we're looking at developing a system which will be part of the academic dashboard that I put in for funding that will not just track our students' academic performance, but also their attendance performance. And this is very important because we know that when students attend school, obviously they're engaged in school, and it's all related also to when they feel safe to be here. They come to school and they learn. And that's the last one, is the school connectedness. We're going to continue training for caring school communities, providing training, a full day of training for our new staff in August, and also a full day of training for new staff in the triadic agreements, which is all about school connectedness. We will also be providing follow-up training for our teachers and providing support of a consultant who will come in and support the teachers in the implementation of the caring school communities. So basically, as I said before, this is something that needs board approval as we move forward with the goals, keeping them the same. Will be, the next steps will be, after board approval, I'll be looking, and having, this will go to the county for approval. And we also send, you'll notice in the plan, we also send an update on how we did with the goals from last year, so that's also included in the plan. Any questions?
My question was, will there be a rating, goals, because that's basically our educational program.
Yes.
Our educational goals, will there be, say, this is what, because I asked you in the meeting we had, just because there's always the need for improvement, but it needs a baseline where you start, and then probably you can say, this is the baseline where we are, and this is where we want to move, and this is how we're going to get there.
You mean like a number?
No, but the current plan, educational plan, could be rated. We achieved 80% of that
Like
in the individual goals. We're rolling it over to the next year in order to get to the next 20%. This is what we need to do. Boom, 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 boom.
I like that.
Rather than, because this document is fairly comprehensive,
it
it's hard to understand.
And that will be part of the academic dashboard.
Right, and then an academic dashboard on which you can report them forward,
Right.
and basically saying, okay, this is when these are the goals, this is where we are, this is the moment in time, and this is how we're going to get there.
Frank, is there more that you want than what would be
No,
on the academic dashboard?
like we are talking about all kinds of things, but we don't talk so much about academic achievement in board meetings. So I think we should be talking more about academic achievements, and that these could be very good goals to talk about. If these are our goals, and this is, if we have a baseline, this is where we are, these are our goals, and then we can all, see what other resources are necessary in order to adhere to the goals.
Yeah.
So dashboard would.
The dashboard, like I had a conversation with her, and just maybe we should get a code for a dashboard.
Yeah, I think it's underway.
It is underway.
Right.
So the spreadsheet I had given you for a scorecard, John, you don't think that's could suffice until the dashboard, electronic dashboard?
No, we just
We'll
need to
have that.
translate it basically into.
Yeah. I don't know where to start. I've tried so many times to get this dashboard thing going.
Yeah.
I think Gwennis
Yeah.
is taking the bull by the
Yeah.
horns, and she has that.
Then we're working
And-
on it,
and
I'm
she-
working with Curtis.
And right, and I've recommended some other things, so I guess now is the time that all of that can come together. That's
Yeah.
the best I can say.
So I don't think I heard in the budget that there is an IT resource.
Yes, that's under non-instructional consultants.
Is that a consultant or a?
Yes.
How many
Yes.
hours of consultant?
We have budgeted, well, he's given a proposal for a plan. He won't be consulting once he's developed the, he'll be helping me put it together. But it's not an hourly rate, he gave me kind of a overall.
So what
amount.
is the retainer and
I'm sorry?
how many hours of work will they be doing?
I don't know that off
We
the
don't
top
have
of my head.
She
I'm
doesn't
sorry, I
have
don't
an offer
know
yet.
top of my head.
So, sorry, just to bring the discussion back, we are approving the LCAP for
Right.
submission to LACO.
Yes, that's the next steps.
Okay.
Yes, the county.
Yeah, they do some stuff, the LAUSD does some stuff.
Oh, we actually sent it to them too, I'm sorry. But
Okay.
it does.
But the county
Lake
approves
is the
it.
requester.
Yes.
Okay.
I think this is good, we really looked at this very carefully and then decided